stay very much at home. You know, when I was growing up on Hilton Head Island, I thought Jacksonville was on the other side of the world. Our aunt Jessie lived on 18 Market Street. Is there a Market Street there? Yes. And she would send her little envelope, her little letter back to my grandmother, who was her sister. And every time she sent that little envelope, there'd be $10 in it. And I always thought Jacksonville was such a rich place. And we're finding out tonight that it is. So we thank you, Jacksonville. I feel somewhat, though, talking about keynote speaker and talking about history and culture, with all these scholars in this room that know a lot more history than I do, and I'm not going to touch that subject much tonight other than to tell you why we do what we do at the corridor. I feel like the man who had gone to heaven, and when he got there, the good Lord was asking for the greatest experience one had on earth. And this guy had experienced the flood of Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And he knew that was the greatest flood ever. So he wanted to tell his story about that flood, greatest flood on earth. And he was about to get up. And somebody pulled his coattails. I think you ought to know, Brother Noah is in the audience. So all these scholars in the audience, I don't want to touch the history subject, the subject of history tonight, and I just wanted to say a few words about this corridor, this commission, and what we've been doing over the last 3 years, and then why we're doing it. We were, you know, as we Gullah Geechee people grew up, most of us never wanted to own up to being a Gullah Geechee person. And I fit that category. I grew up on Hilton Head Island. And we would take the boat to Savannah. We didn't have a bridge when I grew up. There were about 2,000 people on that island at best. 99% of us were Gullah. I often tell people sometimes that I grew up thinking everybody in the world was Gullah except Dick and Jane. Didn't see anybody else. And we'd take that boat to Savannah. Before we got the gasoline engine boat, my father and them had to sail those 18 miles, and it took sometimes 2 days. Had to drop anchor sometimes. And they'd get there and they'd sell their beans and their watermelon and their fish, and they'd come back that same route. Sometimes 2 days to get back. And then this man bought a gasoline engine boat, and that was like a spaceship. It only took 4 hours to get down there. And you stayed there and sold your goods, and you came back the next day. My father and them couldn't wait. They said, boy, I sure wish I'd be able to get to Savannah and back the same day. And when the bridge came to Hilton Head, everybody was happy. They could go and come quickly. But when we got to the mainland in those days, folks, we had to mask our culture. You open your mouth and folks said, oh goodness, you are rice-eating Geechee. And so I stopped eating rice thinking I would talk good. But I still had that mooner, like kuda, turtle, did eat the chicken, all in my vocabulary. Couldn't say teeth, had to say teeth, and mouth. Dropped the first syllable in the different words. That was the speech. And you couldn't wait to learn English, so you could mask that. So you learn English. My grandmother was a Gullah speaker, one of them. And the other one had finished college. So I go to one of them and I heard the King's English. He used words like, make haste. What night? And then the other grandmother say things like kuda and kuna. What is everyone saying? What's the difference between these two people? And so you learn to mask that one grandmother's speech because that got laughed at. And you learn the other grandmother's speech. So when you got to the mainland, you knew English pretty well. And you never mentioned, try not to ever mention the Gullah words. But I went to Savannah State, and as soon as I hit the campus, the kids knew that I was a Gullah Geechee, just by my accent. And so I tried to mask it, but it didn't work. And most Gullah Geechee people had to do that. But when we realized this corridor, I described how long it took you to get to the mainland from Hilton Head. But that was the case on many islands along the coast. Commissioner Hall can attest to it. And not only were you on an island that was difficult, nobody wanted to be on the coast.